Used a rare visit to the Federal Reserve yesterday to renew pressure on Chairman Jerome Powell. The pair stood side by side in matching hard hats as Trump lamented about the cost of the Fed's ongoing building renovations. Powell then fact-checked the president in real time in front of reporters.
So we're taking a look, and it looks like it's about $3.1 billion. It went up a little bit, or a lot. So the 2.7 is now 3.1.
I'm not aware of that.
Yeah, it just came out.
Yeah, I haven't heard that from anybody at the Fed.
Yeah, it just came out.
Our notes had it about 3.1 as well.
3.1,
3.2.
This came from us?
Yes. I don't know who does that.
You're including the Martin renovation. You just added
our entire capital.
Yeah, you just added in a third building is what that is. That's a third building.
Well, no, but it's a building that's being built.
No, it was built 5 years ago. We finished Martin 5 years ago.
It's part of the overall work.
But it's not new.
Joining us now, correspondent with Bloomberg News, David Gura. David, I'm just going to use that head shaking for the rest of time because I never thought I would find a Federal Reserve chairman relatable. But in that moment, it really felt like he was, because this meeting itself was so rare. Even just seeing it on the president's daily guidance, I was like, am I reading this correctly? Can you talk about what it meant to see a president go to the Fed and then stand side by side with the Fed chair? And of course, the head of the banking committee, Tim Scott, is the third member who's there. I don't know where his hard hat was, but what did this mean going in and then coming out of it, what we saw, what you took away from it?
Yeah, it was such a head shake. I'm surprised the helmet didn't fall off while it happened. But this is a meeting that I think that Jerome Powell was reluctant to have over the course of the last few months. He's seen this pressure mount on him, and there have been questions at Federal Reserve press conferences about him reaching out to the president or vice versa, and he's been very respectful of the fact that historically there's been this buffer between the White House and the Federal Reserve. So we had back in May this meeting between the president and Jay Powell at the White House. That was the president's request, and we've seen the president kind of encroach further and further into Jay Powell's world, and we saw that in stark relief yesterday when he went to the Federal Reserve building. So it's a rare thing for this to happen. Yes, the Federal Reserve building, the complex, is just a stone's throw away from the White House, but presidents don't customarily go there. There is this kind of geographic and larger separation between these two institutions. And you see that this is the line of attack that the president and his economic team have been leaning on more and more, that this renovation, which started back in 2017, has exceeded its budget by many hundreds of millions of dollars. But I think it's an important moment to see those two leaders side by side and to see Jay Powell stand up to President Trump. You saw his evident surprise when the president floated that number, and to indicate not just to the president or to Chairman Scott, but to everybody who is watching that the numbers are in fact not accurate. This is a project that, yes, has overrun its budget, but not by that much when you look at sort of the whole thing.
Not by the cost of another building that was completed
Correct.
5 years ago. I thought the notable thing there was Trump has been clear about two fronts, and he's been posting about these. The intent that he has of wanting to see interest rates lowered, and then separately, the constant or semi-constant threats that he could fire Jerome Powell. One of those things he brought directly to Powell's face, interest rates. The other, the firing qualms that a lot of people have, were not physically present or mentioned in that meeting. What did those two things tell you?
Yeah, this has been kind of a wild ride as the messaging from the president, but also his economic advisors has changed. It hasn't been unified as you've seen that attack kind of mount. The president's backed away from firing Jay Powell. And even if you listen to what he said yesterday during that press availability after that tour, it seemed a lot softer in terms of its messaging than we've seen in the past. I think that there was some hope from the president and his advisors that this could be, again, a way by which he could force the Fed chairman to step out of that position or get lawmakers and others to kind of rally around the fact that there's been this overrun that might evince some mismanagement. We didn't hear that from him yesterday. We had the president kind of inspecting that renovation, looking at all that had been floated in letters and commentary in the weeks ahead of this, whether that's the VIP elevators or the rooftop garden, all of these facets of the construction. We didn't hear that yesterday. So I think there's this recognition kind of forming among the president, certainly from his Treasury Secretary, maybe not from his Commerce Secretary, whose message seems to be a little bit different here, that maybe the best course of action here is for the Fed chairman to finish out his term and for them to focus more fully on picking who his successor is going to be.
Yeah, and that has been the more sober-minded argument from people like the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. I think you're right to point out the little bit of a schism there behind the scenes. But the other piece of this that we're, of course, always tracking is the trade agreements that are being signed amid these larger threats of continued tariffs. Trump heralded new agreements with Indonesia, the Philippines, and Japan this week. Meanwhile, the administration and the EU are racing to clinch a deal. You actually spoke with two former trade officials on Bloomberg's Big Take podcast about what's coming next in this trade war. Tell us what to expect.
Yeah, you mentioned those two trading partners. So the EU and India are huge ones, and suffice to say, this administration really wants to get those locked up before that August 1st deadline, the extension of that 90-day pause that the president put in place. So next week is going to be really pivotal for that reason as we come up against that deadline, but also because of the economic data that we're going to get next week. That's GDP, it's jobs data. We're going to look at all of that to see sort of how manifest this trade war has been in the health of the U.S. economy. Of course, there's a Fed meeting next week as well. So those two former trade representatives, Bob Zoellick and Mike Froman, just talked about sort of what they're watching for going forward here. And one thing that really stood out to me is just the political fallout from all of this. Are we going to start to see, given that economic data, given sort of how many deals have been signed versus what they expected, any more action on the political side in terms of reaction to how the president has been playing this trade war strategically, Ali?
Yeah, always tracking the ripple effects here. Bloomberg's David Gura, thank you, as always, for coming on.